Let's welcome Carlee Wolfe to Open Tech Talks.
Hello, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Carlee, for joining us. And as you know, our show focused on a lot of generative AI and AI. And I thought to brought you on the show at the right time, where a lot of going on AI, Gen AI, and now is the time where maybe from a leadership point of view, individually, everyone need to rethink about the career progressions and how to even coach others, how to treat others. So that's where your specialty come, right?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, and I love this topic too, by the way.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. So maybe let's start with if you can just give us a short brief about yourself, what you do, what you're doing, and then and then we can start the conversation.
Sure. Really, what I do revolves around careers, and that shows up in a lot of ways. So I work at Hyatt Hotels organization, and in that capacity, I support leadership development, company culture, performance management. So in other words, how do people, when they come have a career at Hyatt, that they feel good about what they're doing, how they're contributing, and are ultimately able to be their best. In the community, I serve on nonprofit boards. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, so I work on the serve on the City of Baltimore Workforce Development Board, also an organization called Perscolis, which is probably near and dear to this group, which is they provide free IT training, including AI to help enable jobs of the future. So there's some career work there within the city. And then I also support and do some career coaching with folks. So that's on an individual basis. So for me, it's all in the realm of careers, and I've spent about 20 years in this capacity, kind of building up this experience. And as a
All
fun
right.
side note, I'm also a big sports fan. I've coached volleyball for 20 years, and I work in adaptive sports, so sitting
Oh,
volleyball. So always a fun
that's
one. If
good.
people haven't heard of it, definitely check it out. It's a fun sport. It's in the Paralympic side.
All right. So maybe let's start with as you spent 2 decades, right? So maybe what's one career truth you wish you would known earlier?
Mm. That's a good one. Maybe it's having confidence in a truth that someone gave me earlier, which is the power of networking. Early in my career, I didn't really know what that meant. People said, "Well, just go network." I'm like, "Okay, whatever that is." And I'd like show up at people's desk and say, "I'm here to network." So I didn't really know what that truly meant, but I went with it because I had great leaders telling me that. And so perhaps it's really believing and understanding. One, truly, sometimes when you connect with someone, you never know that when that will yield. So I guess there is a little bit of go with the faith on that one, because there are conversations that I've had that don't yield something till 10 years later. And yielding could be anything. It could just be, hey, we connected somewhere at another event, or maybe I was able to help you in a career move. So one, believing in that. But two, what is networking? It is the relationship and the shared relationship that you have in the pursuit of learning and connection. And so where can you connect with people on shared interests? Where can you learn together? And how do you build from that to make something great in your relationship? And oftentimes when we're talking about work, that yields things at work, right? Maybe it's about a project or it's about thinking about career next step. So maybe I'm adding a little bit of clarity to my advice that I was given when I started my career for those who are listening in that space. But two, it's the maybe the belief in, because I just didn't know what that meant. I didn't have the experience to back it up, and now I do. I'm like I'm all in. I'm all in.
Okay. But thank you so much for. But I still feel this is one of the fundamental challenge right now to
Yeah.
understand what is power of networking is.
Mm,
Not only understanding and then even taking some steps to improve that, or maybe you say build it. I mean,
yeah.
even individually, I also lack, right? So maybe some audience which are listening to him. So if you can share some tips for us.
Absolutely. I'll name one right now. You mentioned like what is it or where do we go? One thing that's so fascinating about today is we're just so, in one way we're hyper connected, but from a human to human standpoint, we're all could still be pretty separate. And I think that that could be good or challenging. So if you're looking for human connection, maybe that is a challenge. Or maybe if you're like, hey, I like to be separate, that's great. Wherever you are. So I
Mhm.
say use where you are and what you're comfortable with to begin networking. So in some cases for folks that might be, I'm gonna look for a session in my community or at a conference within my industry. And not only am I gonna go learn about what's being presented, but I'm going to introduce myself and tell people where
Mm,
I work and what I'm doing and
mm,
hear from them on what they're working on and be curious about, hey, have you heard about a new tool? Have you heard of a new way of working? Right. So I think that's on one side. I'll also put that in the human extrovert bucket. I think there's also, I don't like networking or I'm afraid of it. How do I engage? Or I want other things other than human touch. And I think this is where it's so fascinating. like the forums that we're probably all in, whether it's by subject matter expertise, industry, maybe it's a forum, maybe it's a chat, maybe it's a public Slack. These are all ways to engage. And I'll just give one example that happened to me last week, which is I was on LinkedIn, and someone had a conversation going about women leading AI.
Mm-hmm.
And so I chimed in some thoughts, and someone said, "Oh, that's great. That's a great comment. I'd love for you to join Women Leading AI. We have this group." And I'm like, "Okay, what's that group?" I went to go check it out. And I signed up. And so here I am. I'm on a Slack team with people all over the world who are women who are leading in AI, and our conversations about where do we continue to learn new things, what's happening in the space, how do we represent the conversation in bigger, bolder ways, celebrating one another. So I'm giving that one as an example to say, here I was just mindless, well, not mindlessly, I was reading and being intentional, but still scrolling. And I found something that interested me and I got involved. And here I am now networking. So maybe a couple of examples for ways for people to engage, but I'm going to go back where I started, which is how do you like to connect with people and start there? Because I think networking can be tough in concept. So
Mm-hmm.
remove that barrier for yourself and go with where you already are and just think
Mm-hmm.
about where you can tap into some resources.
Okay. Because sometimes networking becomes a very difficult task. That okay, if I try to network, and then what others people would think about it. But your point was not to do it for the networking for the sake of networking. Basically, you are going some right.
For sure. I mean, I think, and that's an important question to ask yourself too. What do I want to get out of networking? And I think for
Mm-hmm.
some people, it's just pure connection, right? I want to
Mm-hmm.
learn and say hello and shake someone's hand. For others, it might be I want to go learn something new about a craft and I want to go find the best people that are doing that so I can challenge myself.
Mm-hmm.
Or for others, it might be I want to have a shared experience. Like I want to go to an event where people are doing similar things that I am because I do this at home, but no one else in my friend group does, and I want to be able to connect with those people. So
Mm-hmm.
you're right. It's not, I think oftentimes that's what happens. We're like, use the broad term of go network. Like it's like a box to check and a thing that
Yeah.
you've now earned like this badge on. You're like, I'm networked. But like, what is your kind of personal drive there? And maybe for those that are like, I actually don't have a personal drive network, I'd say, what are you maybe looking to learn or to grow in? And you don't have to do that alone, especially with where we're at right now. You and I are talking about AI. The world's just moving so fast in that space. I guarantee you there's networks and pockets of people talking about something that you've never heard about or seen. So even if it's just that to stay on top of things, that might be worth a consideration.
Okay. So maybe there's a linking question to from networking to career growth. So is there any myth behind that which people think about it and it's holding them back?
I think the one thing that might hold people back today is not staying curious. I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot going on in the world that can cause fear, right? Like, what's
Mm-hmm.
next for me? Is my job
True.
going away? Right. But if we remain open of like, well, what is happening with my job? Where is my industry or my skill set or my
Mm-hmm.
expertise evolving to? How do
Mm-hmm.
I be a part of it? How can I learn more? I think starts to shift that a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would kind of flip it maybe in that sort of a way of thinking that might, in absence of curiosity, right,
Mm-hmm.
sort of the open minds, moving from a closed mindset to an open mindset, I think just starts to unlock a whole lot of possibilities, not just for yourself, but back to kind of the career aspect of things is a real power tool, a real mindset opportunity.
Okay. So now maybe let's bring back the discussions to the AI. And as an AI is changing everything, right? Individually, organizations and all. And there's a lot of pressure and for individuals and leaders as well. So in your opinion, while you work with different organizations and individuals, anything which you can share that, okay, there are certain things you need to be worried about it. There are certain things you should not.
Yeah. I think if you're talking about from a leadership perspective,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of things I think people can be thinking about. One is how are you, both as an individual, but also within the context of your team, building
Mm-hmm.
a culture of, I'll use the term learning out loud. So
Mm-hmm.
often, especially as adults, we kind of go off and we learn a thing and we become experts and then we come back and we're like, all right, I've learned the thing. But with AI, just so much is continuing to evolve, both in our own application, also what's happening around the world with the world around us. And so in the culture of learning out loud, it's I think enabling permission for people to one, feel comfortable with not knowing all the answers, two, there's power in not just your own mind, but in the mind of others. And three, I think that this is also, in a lot of ways, enabling or maximizing the usage of AI is depth and understanding, right? And so where do you get that? By practicing, by hearing from others, by having a behavior shift, by modifying kind of your own language and usage. And that comes from, in one way, from a communal way of learning and engaging. So that'd be one component of leadership that I would throw out there, which is how are you creating again, a learning out loud culture. I think it's about also creating a culture where you're providing support,
Hmm.
especially in companies today, whether it's maybe you're an AI expert because you're in tech and you're the one that's actually facilitating. But if you think about how your tools get into the organization, I think the unlock is support. Are people getting trained? Do they have the capacity and space to take on something new? Are we recognizing when people do something well? I think right now there's a lot of assumption based on a lot of our own experience of just using like a generative AI. They're like, oh, it's just like Google, just go do it. And you're like, well,
Right.
there's way more underneath that, right? In so many ways. But until we give people the space, capacity, training, perspective, open that up, we're never going to unlock what's happening. So whether you're leading a team, how do you support them in learning those new skills? Or you're in IT and you're enabling the organization, how can you encourage the organization to create capacity and time for these sorts of things? And then I would say the last thing would be, how are you providing intention and care within your team?
Mm,
Right? This
mm,
whole, people might be afraid, they might need support or encouragement. Or if you're again, if you're in tech and you're deploying these tools, how are you bringing some intention around decisions that you're making with the organization? Things like, I bring this up a lot. Are the tools accessible to everybody? Right? If you ask the organization to optimize something, well,
mm,
does everyone actually have access to it?
mm.
So how are you providing that intentionality and care, not just within your team, but if you're leading outward into the organization, how are you asking those questions and facilitating that with the other business leaders that you work with?
Right. So, thank you for sharing this tip. And based on your
Mhm.
experience working with different organizations and individuals, what are some common traits or maybe challenges which you see people are facing? Either they are leaders or maybe in the individuals, and you can share some of tips for them.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is honestly leading and managing in today's corporate environment. I think that teams struggle with managers, and I think managers sometimes struggle with managing. And a lot of that comes down to capacity and in the middle management space, working between a top level and then supporting your team below that. And there's a lot of demands that sit in the middle where you also may not be fully equipped. And so maybe a couple things to think about. One, if you are that employee and you're looking up at your manager and you're saying, gosh, I could really use some more. One question I might ask is, how are you assuming positive intent in that space? Is
Mhm.
there anything that you can draw upon to, one, work through what you need, but two, provide some clarity to the manager of what really is at the root where you're having some challenges so you can work it through together? Two, I think there's like a self-leadership component in today's also working world, right? What are the skill sets I'm growing? What are the networks that I have beyond my manager to also help me? I think in the shared space, how are manager and employee thinking about skill development, career development differently, right? As the world is changing, things are moving quickly. And so how do we be more intentional about where we're headed versus what's just happening today? And then if I'm in that manager seat and I'm struggling, one, I think all those still apply, right, to your manager. But I think
Mhm.
the other piece would be, how are you prioritizing and using your energy and time and expertise in the best way? And are
Mhm.
there ways that you can free up space? So in the spirit of AI, right, where can you find efficiencies, whether it's time, literally time spent for my task, or using
Mhm.
tools to provide some additional capacity? Like, where can you optimize yourself with your
Mhm.
energy, time, and expertise to support your team and the organization at the same time? And the last thing I'll share too, whether it's employee or manager, is how do you also continue to support yourself? I think this is one of those moments, not in a
One other
selfish
thing.
way, both in the your own health, like how that I think should be selfish to take care of yourself, meaning, whether it's gym, sleeping, food, all those things. But the other part I'll say is around skill development, advancement, exposure. I think everyone can play a role in their own, we'll call it library of knowledge that they're continually obtaining, because I think that that just continues to make us great leaders, makes us great employees, and makes us great humans.
I think you brought a very well point of this library of knowledge, which sometime while working in corporate world, we forget about it, right? And we just focus more on day to day, and then we lock ourselves that, okay, we don't have a time. So based on your work with the different individuals, can you share some tip for them that, okay, no, you need to have a pause and rethink about it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, well, one, I'd go back to that, like, learning out loud culture, like, how are you maybe just talking to people about what they're facilitating and learning? It's as
Mm-hmm.
simple as, "Hey, have you learned anything new today?" Maybe that sounds cheesy, but, like, hey, maybe it's what's going on in your world when you see AI. Maybe it's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more specific and on theme.
True.
But I also think there are so many tools out there these days that help
Yeah.
curate learning in such like snapshot ways, targeted ways. And so where potentially your opportunities to consume? Is that waking up 15 minutes early to give yourself a 15 minutes of quiet time to take some review? Is that at lunch when you're kind of like thinking about what's next? Is that when you take your walk, you're listening to a podcast? So I always like to encourage people, this is similar to the networking, like meet yourself where you are.
Yeah.
There's no reason to like create change on change, right? It's already difficult for us to build a new habit. So where can
Mhm.
you start simply? And
Mm.
I think that's starting with taking inventory. Where do I have time, or can I make time? Or if I don't have time, where can I overlay and be
Mm.
more efficient about something? And then I would start with, well, what do I want to learn? Because I think in knowing what to learn, then you can find the tool that curates, supports, and pushes you on that journey. So from apps to articles to groups, these are all ways that we could be learning. The last thing maybe I'll share with that is, it's the world's a funny place, right? We meet a lot of people, we go a lot of places, and where can you maybe just even be curious about where you're at that you can take away from a learning perspective? So I'll give an example. I was in Seattle a couple of months ago, and they had this coffee shop, and
Mhm.
there was a robot serving coffee, which I just found fast. I was just like, my mind was blown just in general watching this robot. By the way, there was a human there, but the human was like serving the milk when the robot ran out of milk, those things. And so while it was like a fun little like tourist stop and you could be like, oh, the future, it had me really thinking like, well, where else is this going to show up? Like when we see
Mm.
this happening,
True.
what does that mean for industry? What does that mean in that case for the person who's in the store? So how are you also consuming in your everyday life to be curious about what you can take in that learning experience? There's a lot of ways to engage, and it
Sure.
can be as simple as that.
That brought me to a point from robot, right? How the future of work is changing,
Mhm.
right? And for everyone, either you're individual, either you're leaders. But are we prepared?
It's a good question. I think that there's a spectrum of this today.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say in my hopeful lens here would be what are our opportunities to continue to prepare and maybe to be a part of the change? And so I think being a part of is a key word. One, as an individual, what can I be a part of? If I'm in an organization and I'm leading or I'm the person building the tools, how do I help my organization or the people that work in it be a part of? If I'm in the communities that I am in, how do I enable my community to be a part of? Or how can I bring a part of me to them, right? So I think that's part of preparedness or to be a part of the change. I'll say that. Broader, I do think back to the spectrum of where people are at, I think there's a continuum of where organizations are at of I'll just use it from an organizational lens, like preparedness. There's preparedness of literally industry. Are you moving as quickly as you can to advance technology in your space? But I think there's also a preparedness, and this is where I'm going to lean into and very passionate about this of are we prepared to meet like the humanness with the AI? I think it's really
Mm.
easy to say, hey, we're placing efficiencies or we're changing how we're working. But this is new technology in many, many ways. So I think it's in service to all of us to really think about what is the change that we're intending to make. Is that a really nice shiny penny right now? Have we dug in a click deeper to see if the impact is intended or if we've actually put in the work to invest to realize? I think those are all really important in you said preparedness. And so I'll give an example, right? Like maybe I have like let's use customer service. We all have that experience of
Right.
some sort of AI interaction when we have a need. Okay, so I'm company A. I'm like, oh, I'm going to have an AI agent taking customer calls. we're going to turn it on and everything's good and then we'll move forward. We made some efficiencies, we moved some people around. Okay, but did anyone dig in to actually figure out, all right, what are our customer needs? What are the nuances and the questions that they ask? How are we escalating needs? Are we still timely? Are we actually saving time for our customers? Like these are the questions where we can be more intentional. So
Mm,
I'm going to take preparedness and answer it with like this sort of overlay, which is, are we prepared for the intentionality of the impact that we're trying to facilitate? And I think those are different types of questions and ways of thinking than maybe we've gone about it before.
I think we are in a stage where it's excitement is there. Take
A
it
lot of
everything. Oh, it's
excitement.
something. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So individually, and then organizations are still trying to figure it out how to bring it into organizations because they carry a lot of old ecosystem to adopt all these agents and everything. But
Oh
we are
yeah.
in excitement.
Well, and the tools also need some work. They don't come out of the box ready to
Yeah,
solve every problem.
that's
And
true.
so it's interesting, like you and I are kicking this around, and so people could take our word for it just by kicking it. But I'll say the research is out there now, right? So, like the big consulting firms, right? There's all this data backed in terms of the percentage of success. It's actually quite low of the major impact or transformation that it's facilitating in organizations. By the way, it doesn't
Mm.
mean that it's not in some way. I
Yeah.
just think in the excitement and in the big spotlight, there's some stuff around the corner that is still being figured out that we don't talk about enough.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Maybe last couple of questions on from an audience point of view, if someone is listening and he's an individual contributor, right? And usually sometime he or she feel that, okay, I'm stuck in my role if she or he currently working in some corporate world, right? And then whatever different training programs they go through it, right? But it's still something is missing and then they're not happy what they're doing it. So based on your work with different individuals, maybe any tips for them that, okay, what path they can follow, right? Rather than just, okay, keep in the same pace.
Yeah. I love this for two reasons. One is you use the word path, and I think the path is changing. I think the idea of a path is turning more into an open road.
Mm,
And that, obviously depends on where you work and where your industry's at, but I think the idea of I'm now moving step to steps to step. By the way, that's been changing for a long time, but I think the disruption of skills, the disruption of work, the disruption of what is translating from what people add to the organization is totally shifting. So, what can people do? So, that's the first part. So, one is just like encourage the openness of
right.
curiosity of what's possible. But the second, and maybe perhaps more practical or in the moment way to think about it would be, you mentioned like that unsatisfaction. When I work with people on coaching through this, we revisit a couple of key things. Like one, where do you really see kind of your purpose or your mission? Like when you
Mm-hmm.
wake up during the day, like what are the problems that you want to be able to solve? Where do you want to
Mm,
be able to say like, oh, I'm so glad I helped with this part of the project or this thing
mm,
going on in the organization? Like what is that for you? And just giving yourself permission to imagine and
mm,
think big. The other part is like what are skill sets that you have today or want to build in near
mm,
term
mm,
future? So in other words, what's your currency you're bringing to work?
mhm,
And the third part being like what interests do you have when you think about like where not beyond skill sets, but like where you're contributing. So a skill set would be
mm,
like maybe project management, but I want to apply project management in delivering, manufacturing in a
mm,
manufacturing
mm,
organization. So by examining, I think these questions, we can take a step out of our roles and then
mhm,
start to marry these things. So, all
mhm.
right, my purpose is that I want to make my community better because
Right.
I'm going to be a project manager that brings efficiency to every
Mhm,
organization. So I have this
mhm,
like nice little marriage of three components. All right, well, let's start talking about your next step in your career around those things. What companies
mm.
have that? Where can you go? Or within your own company, where are those
True.
roles at? So a little bit of a long answer, but I invite people to think about those questions because I think it opens up more than how do I move to the next box or the next
True.
space and starts to lean into, the open road of possibilities.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. And if for the listeners, if someone want to reach out to you, what's the best medium or place they can reach out to you?
Yeah, two places. So LinkedIn, I'm always, first of all, I'm pretty active there, so always happy to followers, but also feel free to reach out. I am a networker and a connector, so happy to take questions. And also aceandarrowconsulting.com. Always happy to connect in that way too. So, and I welcome
Thank
it.
you so much for spending. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the conversation today.
Thank you.